Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for braving the London sunshine to be here at this masterclass. We're very grateful to have Avi here. He's not just made the trek from Tel Aviv. He has also had to withstand the pleasures of a night in Liverpool, and he has also just come from Cambridge, where he experienced, just told me, the very best in Cambridge cold showers. So we're very happy to have Avi here. Because this is a masterclass and it's not, like a formal Q&A situation, we are quite keen for interventions where necessary. So please don't be shy at any stage if you have any comments, questions, or indeed complaints about anything that you might see. Avi will be showing a number of clips and he will speak about the clips. And I think that will form the basis for the masterclass. So, Avi, if you'd like to take over.
Hello, thank you for coming. Really, is it still sunny? Because maybe it's snowing by now. No? And thank you, Colm, for the introduction. I'll try and concentrate in this meeting with questions that arise when a filmmaker or an engaged filmmaker puts himself in reality or places himself within the subject matter of that he is interested in for film, which happens a lot of time for me because I'm not a professional filmmaker. I don't make films for a living, or I never am commissioned to make a film. I always make a film when the last resort, because the subject doesn't let go, and in order to move on, I need to make a film and be obsessed by another thing. So I will start with a clip from a film called Avenge, But One of My Two Eyes, which is a film I made that was released in 2005. It was shot in 2003. I will show two scenes. In this clip is actually two scenes from the film, but let me tell you a little bit about the film before. The early 2000 years of 2000 were a very difficult time in Israel and Palestine, or the occupied territories. This was a time of where the second Intifada, the second Palestinian Uprising, started in 2000, September 2000, and it was a very violent uprising. You can move more to the center, because I see you sit like this. Okay, sit up. And there were lots of suicide bombers, Palestinian suicide bombers, blowing themselves up in the cities of Israel, in the towns of Israel. Lots of casualties on the Palestinian side also. Israel reactions were very violent, and well, like always, the numbers, the odds were against the Palestinians. We always say that they kill us, but the numbers showed who really gets killed. This was the time that I'm sure that you remember, also after September 11, that there was a common talk about the death culture of Islam. And the newspapers and television programs were full with experts or so-called experts or wannabe experts about Islam, talking about how death is a very deep thing embedded in Islam. And obviously, I know very little about Islam. I don't know why I said obviously, but I just said it, and the recording is on. I know very little about Islam, and I certainly cannot comment on Islam culture. But I do know a little bit about Israeli culture. I was born and lived there all my life. And one day, after a suicide bomber blew himself up in the center of Tel Aviv, a friend of mine came to our house, and she was terrified, of course, because it's terrifying. And she started to talk about the deadly nature of Islam. And I said, but listen, we have Samson, biblical Samson, that we call Samson the hero. It never doesn't say in the Bible Samson the hero. It says he was a judge. You know which Samson I'm talking? Samson and Delilah, the one who was a very powerful person, and his power was in his hair, and he killed many Philistines. So we have Samson, and Samson is one of our culture heroes. And if you think of what Samson did, yes, after Samson Delilah cut his hair, the Philistines caught him, because then he was powerless. They poked his eyes, and they took him to the temple in Gaza, where shackled, and they placed a boy, a teenager or less, with him, that led him in the temple that was full with 3,000 Philistines. And Samson asked the boy to be led to be positioned between the two pillars that hold the temple. And there he asked God for another, boost of power, because he didn't have any more for the loss of his hair, so that he may avenge but one of his two eyes, those that were poked. And God provides him with the power. He pulls the pillars, the house goes down on him, and on top of the 3,000 people that I don't know if they deserve to die, but I know for sure that the boy didn't deserve to die. Maybe the elders has done such sins that they deserve to die, I don't know. And thus Samson became the first suicide bomber in history, or to the best of my knowledge. Maybe there is an earlier mythological suicide bomber. And we teach Samson in school, every fourth grade, because we study Bible for 12 grades, or 10 grades now. At fourth grade, our children study Samson in school, as Samson the hero, who has done the wonderful act of killing all those Philistines and paying with his life for this killing. and with rare criticism. So I said, this is our culture, yes? We have suicide bombers blowing themselves up in our streets, but we admire Samson. How does it work? Sorry. And then I came up with another death myth, the one of Masada. The story of Masada. Masada is a fortress in the desert near the Dead Sea that was built by Herod. It was built for, he built it beside the fact that he was a big, wonderful builder. He built this specific place as a refuge, as a shelter for himself from his opponents that I don't think he ever used. But Masada, in the year 69, I think, 0069, when the Romans occupied the land of Israel, or whatever it was exactly called at the time, the last Jewish rebels against the Romans were besieged by the Romans on top of this fortress. 960-something people, men, women, and children. And the siege went on for a few months, and at a certain moment, when the besieged realized that the zealots that were on the top of the mountain realized that the Romans were about to break in, they decided that they'd rather die than fall in captivity of the Romans and become slaves, whatever the Romans used to do with their prisoners of war. And they decided to commit suicide. 967, again, men, women, and children, or should I say children, women, and men. And the story goes that in the beginning the parents slaughtered the children. I'm asking myself whether I should continue the story. Isn't this enough? But yes, and then the men slaughtered the women, and between the men there was a lottery and of the last 10, and eventually, anyway, it was between crazy slaughter and suicide. But one thing is for sure, the children didn't decide to commit suicide. I hope you agree with me, without knowing anything about what happened there. The children didn't decide to commit suicide. And again, Masada in Israel is a myth of death or liberty. If we are not, of course, the Masada story is not encouraging Israelis to commit suicide when in danger. It's about not losing the war. It's about encouraging to gain liberty, because otherwise there's death awaiting us. So I thought of doing a film about those two myths. And and of course, it was no coincidence the choice of those two, beside the fact that they dealt with death, which was an issue, was of course connected to the times. This was a time when there were lots of suicide bombers, as said, but also a time when Israel besieged the Palestinian cities again, and the whole regime of checkpoints, of the separation barrier, wall, fence. In some places it's a wall, some places it's a fence. The whole regime that disabled free movement within the occupied territories, not between the occupied territories and Israel. By the way, the occupied territories and Israel is almost the same thing. From my home in Tel Aviv, to get to the occupied territories is, the closest would be 30 minutes by car. So and anyway, the whole place is tiny. I've traveled in the last 4 days, Cambridge, Liverpool, London. Israel is tiny. Israel, Palestine. So the thought was to try and tell those two stories that have parallels in the present, you know, when you make documentaries, when you make historical documentaries, it's very difficult to make a documentary about something that happened a long time ago. People are not there anymore, and sometimes there's very little evidence. So you use documents, you use artifacts, you use sites, sometimes sites where there's nothing, and of course experts, interviews, thinkers, and sometimes, and BBC has done it endlessly, they use a reenactment of imagined moments in the real event. Yes, we've all seen Caesar being stabbed in the Forum, right? Many times in a documentary, not in a fiction film. So they hire actors. First of all, they script it, although, you know, they actually put words in the mouths of characters. They script the real event, and they cast, and they costume, and they sometimes shoot in the real site, and sometimes create the decor, and etc. And this illustrates the history told verbally or with documents, etc. So I decided to also create illustrations to the different parts of the Masada and the Samson story, but not with reenactments, but with documentary situations that are shot. Wow. Whoever wants to leave, don't hesitate, okay? Just don't say it because of me. So I wanted to illustrate, decided to illustrate those two stories with real situations documented in the occupied territory. Situations, of course, that has to do with siege and death and the loss of wish to live. And so it will be so disappointing eventually when you will see the clips, because you will not see any myths there. you will see two scenes in the occupied territories, but I have to tell the story to give you the context of this whole thing. But what I did was, for a year, in the whole of 2003, I traveled to the occupied territories between 2 and 3 times a week. Again, it's all very near. It's not about traveling there and staying there, but it's about getting up early enough in the morning, doing whatever you. And I traveled in different contexts. I was traveling with groups of activists. Mainly a group called Ta'ayush, which is a Jewish Palestinian, well, this is how it was founded, organization of activists who, for instance, help farmers get to their land to plow, or escort children to school where settlers are harassing them, etc. There are very few Palestinians involved now, and the whole organization has become tiny. So I was traveling a lot with Ta'ayush, with NGOs like Physicians for Human Rights, who have a mobile clinic that goes every Saturday to a different village or little town in the occupied territories to provide medical care that people cannot reach otherwise because of the movement regime. With B'Tselem, which is another human rights organization that is creating reports. With journalists like Gidon Levy, who is a human rights writer who has been writing weekly for the last 30 years, weekly stories. Every weekend magazine, there's a story from the occupied territories and a story about individuals, not theories. And with people like there's Yaakov Mano, who is a one-man NGO, really, who goes from place to place. He brings medicine to those who cannot leave to get it. He arranges things. He's in contact with endless number of people, and he organizes olive picking. It's olive picking period. Again, when Israelis come to be like Magen Enoshi, human shield to the Palestinians. So I traveled in a lot of contexts, and that's it. So what I will show you is a short film that is actually made of 2 scenes from Avenge, But One of My Two Eyes, and it's called Details 2 and 3. During the making of Avenge, But One of My Two Eyes, I released a few scenes before the film was finished. And because it was very difficult for me to keep them in the drawer, because making a feature-length film is something that takes between 2 and 3 years, and there were things that I felt should not be kept in the drawer. So it started with one scene called Detail, which, if you will you can find on YouTube if you wish. And then details 2 and 3 that you will see. And until now, we have 14 details. Some are not in the film at all, but basically it was in this idea of releasing stuff and not waiting for a grand opening. So here is details 2 and 3, and two different trips to the occupied territories, and 2 different encounters between the filmmaker and the soldiers. Enjoy. Can we turn off the light? There's no light. This is
Just use the remote.
Right. Okay, sorry.
תראה מחוברת, אל תיגע בראש. אל תיגע בראש. כן, יש לך אישור להיות פה? מה? כן, היה פה הרגע קצין, קצת אלוף, ואמר לנו שמותר לנו להיות פה. אתה יכול לחוות? אל תכוון את זה עליי. אין שום סיבה שאתה תתחיל לשלוח את ידיים למצלמה. לא, לא שלח שום ידיים למצלמה. לא שלחת שום ידיים למצלמה. לא שלחתי שום ידיים, אני לא רוצה שתצלם אותי, מותר לי? לא, אני רוצה לא, אתה שליח ציבור. אז למה אתה עדיין מצלם ושמת למצלמה? אתה שליח ציבור, מותר לצלם אותך. אז אוקיי. מותר לצלם אותך, אתה שליח ציבור. אז תכף נבדוק אם מותר לך לצלם פה או אסור לך לצלם פה. אם מותר לך לצלם פה, לא נפריע לך, אם לא מותר לך. בסדר, אל תכוון את זה עליי. אפשר? אני לא רוצה שתצלם אותך. אתה כרגע אני לא יודע אם מותר לך לצלם פה או לא מותר לך לצלם פה. תמתין. אתה לא מבין עברית? אתה לא מבין עברית? אין אישור. אישור. אל תיגע במצלמה שלי. אל תיגע במצלמה. אל תיגע במצלמה. תזוז, תן לי אוויר. מה? תגידו, אין לכם מה.
רגע, לסוס לי במעגל, חבר'ה, לסוס לי במעגל. על הסף של... אף אחד לא לגעת.
משתמשים בכוח שאסור לכם להשתמש בו.
תעשו לי במעגל.
די, תעזבו אותי. די, בחייכם. איך אתם מתנהגים? איך אתם מתנהגים? מה איך אני מתנהג? מה עשיתי לך?
תוריד את המצלמה.
אין שום סיבה שאני אוריד את המצלמה. לפי החוק מותר לי לצלם שליח ציבור. תכף נבדוק מה החוק יש לך.
אתם לא שמים לב שמה שאתם חושבים זה סוג של אלימות?
אתה לא שם לב.
לא? אתם לא חושבים שמה שאתם עושים זה אלימות?
בדיוק, אבל...
לא? מה זה? איך קוראים לזה?
יש לנו עליו?
יש לכם משהו אחר? נגיד מה זה?
אני מפריע לך אלימות, אתה...
כנראה שאתה רודף אחריו ואתה אומר שהוא לא מפריע לך.
די, בחור.
אני לא עשיתי פה.
די. תפסיק, שמעת? פשוט תפסיק. מותר לנו. סליחה, שמעת על המילה? שמעת על המילה? סליחה, בחור. שמעת על סליחה?
מבקש ממך לעזוב את זה.
מה הבעיה?
מבקש לך לעזוב. לא...
למה? מה הבעיה?
זה שטח צבאי סגור.
קראו לי בבקשה שזה שטח צבאי סגור.
לא מודה לך.
שאנחנו עומדים לפתוח את השער?
לא.
כי אנחנו כבר שאלנו את המנהל האזרחי, ולא ברור למה אין התאמה בין השניים. אוקיי? יש שעה שמנהל האזרחי על פי פותחים את השער.
אני לא מדבר.
אתה רוצה לתת לי מספר אישי בשם? זה גם פה.
אני אתן לך מספר אישי בשם, ואני לא חייב להגיד לך. 697, 4568, עומר אליהו, סגן. אני מתכוון...
הסיבה לאי פתיחה בשער? ילדים?
לא, אני לא מוכן להגיד לך.
למה?
לא מוכן להגיד לך.
תודה.
אני מוכן בבקשה מהג'יפ? תפוס
לא
ברכה?
מפריע.
טוב, מבקש ממך את זה, בבקשה מהג'יפ?
אין שום סיבה, באמת. אתה בקשר סתם, אין שום סיבה. אני לא מפריע לג'יפ, אני לא מפריע לך. בשטח צבאי סגור, תראה לי צו ואל תדבר אחרת. כרגע, בשביל להכריז על שטח צבאי סגור, חובתך להראות צו חתום על ידי מח"ט או גינה. זה הכל. מה אני מפריע לג'יפ שאני עומד לידו, תגיד? באמת, אתה תתבגר, יאללה.
אני אתבגר.
כן, תתבגר, תסתכל עליך, תתבגר.
אני אתבגר?
כן. במקום להזיז אותי מהג'יפ, במקום לבלבל את המוח עם שטח צבאי סגור, תפתחו כבר את השער לילדים האלה שחוזרים לבית ספר. זה מה שאתם צריכים לעשות. כן, אני מרצה לכם. חבורה של אפסים, זה מה שאתם. מי אני שאני ארצה לך? מי אתה? מי אתה?
מי אתה שתרצה לי?
מי אתה תגיד לי? אתה עובד אצלי, אתה חייל בצבא שלי.
אני מקבל פקודות אבל, אני מקבל פקודות.
תסתכל עליך, אתה מקבל פקודות, פקודות לא חוקיות, אתה לא רואה שהילדים האלה מחכים לחזור בית ספר.
תרגע את הטון שלך.
תרגע את הטונים, אף אחד פה לא מרים את הקול על אף אחד.
אדוני, אתה לא תגיד לי איך לדבר, אתה לא תגיד לי אם להרים את הטון. תפתח את השער, זו העבודה שלך. שום עבודה אחרת עכשיו לא רואה לך, חוץ מלפתוח את השער. מנוע מדבר, יופי, סוף סוף לא תדבר.
לא יורד לרמה שלך בכלל.
אל תרד לרמה שלי, חס וחלילה. תפתחו את השער, תסתכלו מי אתם.
כן, מה אתה עושה מעצמך?
מה אני עושה מעצמך?
אנחנו מחפש חיים, אנחנו מתבגר, סגר איך לדבר.
יאללה, יאללה, יאללה. יאללה, יאללה, יאללה. שמעת יאללה, יאללה, יאללה? יודע מה זה יאללה, יאללה, יאללה? זה מה שיש לי להגיד לך. יאללה, יאללה, יאללה.
יוצרים להם חומר...
עומדים פה, עומדים הילדים ליד השער, אתם לא פותחים את השער, אתם לא אומרים גם מתי? תגיד, מאיפה באת? מאיזה חור הוציאו אותך? מאיזה השפעה שלו אותך?
מקווה שיש ילד שמסתכל מה שהוא אמר עכשיו.
מה?
מאוד מקווה שיש ילד, הוא הבן שלך, מסתכל על מה שהוא אמר עכשיו.
לא צריך לענות לך, לא צריך לענות לך. מאיפה באתם, מאיפה? בדיוק. תשובה נכונה.
Okay, so I guess the question is how come I'm here to tell And why didn't they kill me or do something to me? And they didn't, absolutely. And it's not because I'm so frightening or strong or brave. It's because this is the strange creature called Israel that is on one hand, highly militarized country where probably the military is the most important body of this country and the most respected body of this country. Yet, on the other hand, it's as you see, it's possible to lose your temper, to shout at the soldiers like this and come out alive. Where, I don't know about England, in France, people tell me if you would talk like this to a gendarme in the street, you will be dead. And again, it's not about me or him, it's about the collective. This soldier knows very well when he sees me, he doesn't even have to hear my voice or anything I say. He knows immediately that I'm Israeli and that I'm Jewish, that I've probably served in the army like him, and that we are part of, maybe we disagree on stuff, but we are part of the same clan. And that there are things, look, the occupation in the West Bank in Gaza means that there are two separate sets of almost, I would say, I wanted to say laws, but it's almost like physical laws. It's as if there are different people with different physical needs. If you are an Israeli citizen, Jewish or Palestinian, living or traveling to the occupied territories, you are under the normal civil Israeli law. If you are a Palestinian from the occupied territories, then you are under martial law. And martial law is a law that doesn't go under the criticism, for instance, of Supreme Court. It is not made necessarily by people of I don't know how you call it, people of justice, people who are qualified. Martial law is sometimes created by the chief in charge of the area. In both clips, there's a talk about showing the document of closed military zone, which is something that is decided on the ground by the law, because Israel still has the emergency laws that you guys, when you mandated Palestine until 48, I'm sure you remember, you create in Second World War. I'll stop the joking because it will end up with misunderstanding. During Second World War, Britain has created the law of emergencies that allowed the closure of certain zones for military action. And Palestine at the time, were under British mandate, Those laws are still in our law book, in the Israeli law book. So according to the law, the certain level of officer can מפקד חטיבה, איך אומרים מפקד חטיבה? Never mind. A certain level of commander can declare an area closed military zone for military activity. For instance, if there are terrorists and you need to pursue them, to chase them. But yeah, it has to be done with his own handwritten signature, with the map enclosed, etc. What happens in the occupied territories today is that, and it has to be limited for the time of the certain action. What happens in the occupied territories is that almost every soldier has in his pocket a assigned military zone order, tzav order, and with a map, etc., of the region that, and when and this is like it's like you know, some witches are afraid of water. So when they come, you spray them with water, they run away, and this is what they do with Israeli activists. They show the closed military zone order, which is, of course, illegal, but on the ground, you cannot do anything about it. But because of the two different laws, the soldiers are actually implementing the law only to the Palestinians. And if an Israeli does something that the soldiers think is illegal, they cannot touch him. Physically, they cannot touch him. They need to call the police. They don't dial 911 and wait for the answering machine of the police. They have their communication. But they are not allowed to physically, if they want me to remove the camera, they cannot, by the law, they cannot remove the camera forcefully. Of course, sometimes they do, but they, by the law, what they do, the fact that they surround me physically is illegal, absolutely illegal. But so as an Israeli, as a Jew, I go to the occupied territories, but I am under different laws than the one that the military can implement on the local Palestinians. Had I been a Palestinian, local Palestinian, occupied Palestinian, of course I would not behave like this. I would not dare to behave like this. Yes?
Yeah, I was just wondering, do you need special permission as an Israeli civilian to go to Palestine?
No.
But I've just been, they have, at the checkpoints, they have these, the signs that say you can't go into the area, sea.
You are, by the Israeli law, they've declared, you know, the occupied territories is divided to 3 zones, A, B, and C. In A is total control of the Palestinian Authority, and this A is, zone A is the cities, the towns. B is a zone where the security is controlled by Israel, and the rest, the administration, is controlled by the Palestinian Authority. And C is a completely controlled Israeli zone. The zone A has been declared by Israel as unlawful for Israelis. So Israelis, of course, Israelis travel. For instance, if you want to go to Ramallah, you supposedly, or Bethlehem, Nablus, it's illegal for Israelis to enter. But when Israelis want, they enter, and very rarely measurements were taken against those who do, and it never arrived at the steps of the Supreme Court whether indeed it's possible to forbid it.
When I went to Ramallah in 2005, I was a Palestinian taxi driver who specialized in smuggling Jews into sorry, he said otherwise I'd pay a really high fine for the sport.
Maybe he was making a buck on you.
Not really.
I never heard of, because I have many friends who are activists who go a lot. Look, to enter Ramallah is not a problem because, again, one of the crazy things of the separation barrier is that it cuts, you would normally think that the separation barrier separates Palestine, the West Bank, from Israel, right? That the barrier goes along the green line. Green line is the border of before 67 war. No, the separation barriers is always inside the occupied territories, sometimes cutting big chunks of Palestinian territory from the other, meaning that people cannot communicate, people lose contact with their land. This is exactly, by the way, what happens in this scene, which I will tell in a minute, but what happened in Jerusalem, when Israel occupied Jerusalem in 1967, it decided to create the Greater Jerusalem and annexed many neighborhoods and villages that were never part of Jerusalem to become part of Jerusalem, and the Israeli law was implemented there, including a couple of villages like Kufr Uqub, who are now on the other side of the Kalandia checkpoint.
I remember now, it was not a problem getting in, it was getting out.
This is more complicated.
Yeah, with a checkpoint, that was the problem.
But getting in is no problem because you can always go to Kufr Uqub, and Kufr Uqub is inside Jerusalem. Only it's on the Ramallah side of the Kalandia checkpoint, which is you know, it's more complicated to get out of Ramallah. But also, if you say you were in Kufr Uqub, they can't do anything, because unless they catch you somewhere that else. But let me tell you the story of this situation.
Can I just ask you something about you were saying about the clan being that paradigm in Israel? Yeah, you've been to the army, and if you had, I don't know if you do, but if you had a son or daughter, you probably would. At what point does somebody like you becomes a traitor or becomes kind of out of the clan? Is that outside of it? Is Gidon Levy ever in that position, or are you? Or?
Yeah, Gidon Levy is been called a traitor many times. I was called a traitor by proxy, never directly, or at least my hearing was not good enough to. I have a hearing problem. No, I was called traitor by proxy, meaning that I'm a member of, I'm a board member of Breaking, and one of the founders of Breaking the Silence, which is now the traitors of Israel. We are there to, so the government says, to destroy Israel, and so we you know, Breaking the Silence is generally called traitors, even by government members. So in that sense, then I'm.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I was in Tel Aviv earlier this year, and I had a chat with Gideon Levy, and I spoke to him about his work because he's been covering the occupation in Gaza exclusively for quite a long time. And I just said, look, what's the response to your work like? And he said that all the opprobrium just came from members of the public. And he said that the government hadn't really tried to stop him working, so they needed a press pass to get into Gaza. They had been allowed to continue working. He actually said, we're not Turkey, not yet, which I thought was quite an interesting way to close that conversation. But yeah, I just wondered if you had any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, we are. The food is not as good as in Turkey, but we're getting better all the time.
Just another really quick question. So, if you were to film this, what that was 16 years ago, do you think there'll be more aggression now from the soldiers?
I don't know. I have no idea. It's. I also think it's It's an individual situation. You see that the officer, the guy I speak with, he feels terribly uncomfortable, and another guy with more macho aspiration could have treated this differently.
So you don't feel generally there's an increase of this internalized aggression?
Look, there's an increase of aggression all the time, but it probably it's not a generality that if you do this, you do that, you get hit on the head and kicked in your ass. Anyway, the situation here and why we arrived to monitor this gate. This is the separation barrier. Yes, what you. This is a gate in the separation fence that cuts this specific place is near a village called Khir-Bejbara, which is a tiny village that is situated right on the Green Line, inside the West Bank, on the Green Line, which very close to 67 Israel, at the back of Tira, if you ever heard of Tira, Taiba, in that area, and it's now the separation barrier goes a little bit east of Khir-Bejbara, meaning that the village is caught between two lines. The 67 line that they can't cross without travel permit, and the line that you see here, the separation line. And it's such a tiny village that there is no school. So every morning, the kids, the gate opens 3 times a day. At 6:30 or 6, something like that. At 1:30, midday, 13:30, and in the evening or late afternoon. And so in the morning, all the children walk past the gate when it opens, where minibuses await them and take them to the town of Tulkarem, which is the nearest town, where they go to school. And they return in 2 shifts. This is the 12 o'clock shift, the younger children. The older children return at 1:30. And the gate opens only once in midday. So they wait. Well, now the whole thing changed. This is not correct for now, because also by Supreme Court they moved the fence there. They changed the route. But anyway, this was good for a year or so. in 2003, the children were waiting there at the heat of the summer and in the rain of winter until 1:30 arrives, and the other shift of kids arrives also. Then the gate opens. So I came there with Physicians for Human Rights, monitor workers, I don't know how to call it, field workers, who came to monitor the situation because there were complaints about what's happening there. The woman that speaks in the beginning with the soldier is the Physicians for Human Rights field worker. And well, you saw what happened in the situation. He refuses to answer her. I get really excited, if you can call it. No, I lost my temper. I knew that I was filming. It was no surprise to me later to come home and see that the camera was running. But I did lose my temper also. At the time, I used to shoot with I had a pouch here on the belt, and the camera was on a monopod, and there was a how do you call it? Chagura, a belt of holding the camera, so I could leave hands, and the camera would still be on the. So this is how all this happened. But I was aware of the fact that I'm filming. I don't think I played to the camera there, but I did lose my temper. Now, the saddest thing, or maybe it's not the saddest, maybe it's the more happier thing. But actually, it's very sad. At 1:30, the other shift arrived, and by then there were already on both sides of the gate people waiting. You know, people with bags, etc. Farmers with tractors, and people with cars. There were quite a few people, and a few dozens school children. And then you would expect that after having the gate so firmly closed for the time until it opens, that it will take endless time for everybody to cross, because they will check each and every one with the travel permit and see what's in the bag. No, the gate opened wide, everybody crossed, and then they closed it again. And you ask, so what was this about? Why didn't the gate open before? If it was so easy. And so I'm saying, you know, on one hand, it's a happy note, because at least people were not checked and abused again, and you know, when you are now sometimes in some public spaces, people look into your bags, etc. It's not fun. But then again, it's at least if you this is so arbitrary. This has nothing to do with anything but harassing and torturing. It drives you crazy. Okay, so the film Avenge, But One of My Two Eyes was a huge success. No, it was definitely my most successful film, And definitely, I was very happy with it, and I still am. And this is a film that was premiered in Cannes Film Festival in the official selection, which is, I will never be there again, that's for sure. There's no way, also for documentaries to enter, this is, you have to be a Michael Moore, and I'd rather not. But anyway, but it was a huge disappointment. Because it was so successful, festivals, etc., and I thought it was strong, I tried to release it in Israel properly, in one cinema in Tel Aviv. For 3 weeks, more people saw it in the avant-premiere screenings than came to the cinema to see it, and it was on television on a tiny documentary channel, like most of my films, and there were critics wrote about it, but somehow this film that I was so engaged in never penetrated the socio-political discourse, which is normally where I begin, where I don't begin with an aesthetic proposition. I begin with a political. It's true that I don't know to do populist politics. I cannot be a politician, but I start with the hope, not for change anymore, but for participation. And it was a huge disappointment, especially because my career, was flourishing. Flourishing, yeah. And I traveled the world, and the film was released in different countries, and at home it was nothing, and it was a big disappointed crisis with thoughts of maybe it's not worth it. And it took a while until I made a film after that, and I'm now going to tell you a little bit about the film that I made after, and we'll see a clip from that. And this issue of the separation between the activist and the artist has become has been a burden of okay. In 2004, I was lucky to be part of. 2004 is while editing this film, while editing Avenge, but one of my two eyes. I was lucky to be part of the group of people that founded Breaking the Silence. This group of people is a few soldiers, ex-soldiers, people who were in 2004 just released from their military service, and photographer Mickey Kratzman, I don't know if you heard the name, who used to work with Gideon Levy for many years, and myself. The soldiers came to Yehuda Shaul, who's the main character, the leading force within Breaking the Silence, came to Mickey Kratzman, and he was just released from the military service, and he needed to do something about his experience. And he proposed to Mickey to do to curate a show, that Mickey would curate a show of photographs of soldiers that soldiers took during their service in the town of Hebron, in the West Bank. And Mickey, of course, he's a highly politicized artist. Of course, Mickey thought it was a great idea, and then as they started working, there were talks about including videotaped testimonies of soldiers in the show, and this is when Mickey asked me to join, and the show was a big success. About 6,000 people came to see the show. It was very interesting. Soldiers came on Fridays. It was Friday is the day that soldiers go on weekend leaves, and they would come sometimes in uniform with their arms, with their weapons, and sometimes with their families. And the soldiers would do private tours without being connected to the exhibition, explaining the photographs. It was extremely interesting. And this exhibition started breaking the silence. After the exhibition, we decided to concentrate on collecting testimonies of soldiers about what they have done, about their experience. It was not a therapeutic. It's different from how, without undermining it, how Sir No Sir, etc., the veterans organizations in post-Vietnam or during Vietnam War also collected testimonies, but there the whole organization was, or the incentive was the problems of veterans' inacceptance by the society when they returned from Vietnam. And they started telling about their experience in Vietnam because of this gap. So, but we decided to collect testimonies in order to shatter the transparency of the occupation. Shatter? It makes sense? This, because Israel has succeeded very, very well for its own citizens, and it's a little puzzling because in almost every house every home there is a soldier. In almost every Jewish home there is a soldier, yet we don't see the occupation. It's as if it doesn't exist. So the incentive was to make the occupation present. Okay, so in the early days, we didn't have any funds. Now we are very well funded, thank you, by European governments and foundations, and which is one of the reasons why we are so attacked, because we are. It's considered that, or it is said that we are concentrated on smearing Israel outside. Okay. But okay, we'll not get to that. And but in the first year we didn't have any money at all, and it was all about doing voluntary work. And at the time I worked in the organization, and I did. Now I'm a board member. I don't work, and of course we don't get paid, so that nobody misunderstands. And what I did was I used to listen to audio taped testimonies and log them for editing. You know, you never publish the whole testimony. You eventually edit it to chunks and remove a lot of information that is irrelevant. And this is how I heard the testimony of Z32. Every testimony of breaking the silence, because we publish them anonymously. Then every testimony has a code. Most of the codes start with a Z. And so Z32 is a story about, let me do some exercise here. Then I'll move. For you, the sun is a blessing. Some people, the sun is a
curse.
A curse. A curse.
A curse.
A curse like this. Oh, I wish I could speak like that. So Z32 is a story of, is a testimony by a soldier who was in an elite unit, who was sent one night to do a revenge operation to kill Palestinian police who were positioned in checkpoints. We're talking about 2002. At the time, there were still Palestinian checkpoints, according to the agreement with Israel and the Palestinian Authority. Nowadays, there are no Palestinian checkpoints. The story was that the night before, 6 Israeli soldiers were killed by Palestinian fighters in a checkpoint. So the following night, 4 elite units went to 4 different Palestinian checkpoints with the order to kill Palestinian policemen, whether armed or unarmed was not the question. And so Z32 has participated and yet confessed a few years, 3 years after the, 2 or 3 years after the event, he confessed. And I found his testimony very interesting. First of all, because it's the idea of revenge. You wouldn't think that a state, a democratic state, is engaged in revengeful decisions. This is mafia, the terror groups, but not. Okay. So this is was one of the reasons why it interested me. Also, another reason that interested me was because the guy describes the event and says how much he actually enjoyed it. And now it's not as terrible as you think right now. He didn't enjoy the killing. He enjoyed putting into practice everything that he learned during training. It's like, think about in football, those who sit on the line, they are dying to play. Substitute. Sometimes they wish that their group loses so that they will be called to, and it's a paradoxical they hope that Ronaldo will break a leg so that they can come in and show that they have a leg. So this was his story. He practiced and practiced and practiced, and it never materialized. and this whole energy of wanting to this you see it in I think in a way in Full Metal Jacket of Kubrick. The first part is the practice, and then the soldiers are in the field, and of course they realize that it's very different from what they
practiced.
Yeah, or what they imagined would. So anyway, I eventually, after a lot of hesitation, I decided to try and make a very simple film. I thought that the audio was strong, and I thought that a video will be even stronger. Just a medium close-up of a person telling his experience and the aftermath, and etc. So I called him, and we met, and he very quickly said yes. He knew my work, which was a lot of help, because I didn't need to explain, and he knew my politics, and of course he knew breaking the silence, because he testified for that. And but the but was, but you cannot show my face. Hello. But this is, I mean, you cannot, we're talking about a middle close-up film of a person talking, and you cannot show his face. Of course, I understand. I'm not criticizing him. I'm thinking about poor me. And this is the beginning of this is the real beginning of the film, because then I really had to think because I couldn't. It was inconceivable for me to darken him, or to pixelize him, or to shoot him from the back, or to shoot his nails, or what, you know. Also, because all those images that are dark or pixel, it's immediately stigmatizing the person. And I wanted the complexity of because it's really he's not a monster. If there are no monsters, if you ask me, it's this exactly the complexity of someone normal and normative who, as in his case, even within his society, is not abnormal for having killed whoever he killed. But maybe in a more general way, he's done a terrible thing. But in Israeli society, he's done the right thing. I don't know if you follow the story of this Azaria guy from Israel who has killed a Palestinian who stabbed a soldier before, but was already shot. And about 12 minutes after the guy was already lying on the ground, he killed him, put a bullet in his head, and now he has the trial. And here he was caught on a video, and there was no way he would not be brought to trial. But the majority of the Israeli public thinks that he is what they call the son of all of us. The son of all of us. Okay, so how do I show him without showing him? Or how do I show his expressions without exposing his identity? These were the main questions. And eventually I came up with this idea of fitting him with a digital mask. The organs of expression are hands, as you must have noticed in the past hour, and the mouth and the eyes, if you ask me. And maybe my dog would say that also. So I decided to provide him with a digital mask of the box of the face, and leave the mouth and the eyes visible, and so you will be able to feel what the emotions, the expressions, but not actually see the face. And we did some tests, and we realized that it's possible. It cost a lot of money, but it's possible. Today, it would be so much easier, but this is a film that was finished in 2008. Terrible. Anyway, the film owes me so much money. But then I said, "Oy vavoy, I have succeeded." I mean, we're talking still in the period of conception. I've succeeded. I've succeeded in providing him shelter inside my film. That's terrible. I'm harboring an assassin inside my film. And now I will not play naive. I have the tendency to contemplate on the issues of the films I'm making within the films. Like the films are both documentaries, but also making of themselves. I find it different when you think of making a film, and then when you actually documentary, and when you actually go into reality, and like you saw, suddenly you participate in. It's not just about taking a picture. It's about sometimes your presence creates situations, and of course, when you work with somebody, these are anonymous people to me, but when you work with somebody, you know he gives you something, you give back, and it's dynamic. It's never fixed. Yeah, I cannot follow my ideas. Reality is so much stronger. So I realized that I'm called to react again within the film to what I'm doing, or to my responsibility in what is happening, and this brought me instead of talking to the camera like I did in previous films, I decided to sing to the camera. And it had its origins, but I'll try to save time because very soon I would hope to hear. Maybe you want to know something. So basically, I need to add just one more thing. That at a certain moment, the Z32 felt, when we were interviewing him, felt that he didn't speak the way he wanted, that he didn't feel free to express himself the way he wanted. So I gave him a camera and told him to do his own testimony without our presence, and then he started filming his girlfriend. No, him and his girlfriend. The dialogues between them are concerning not So I want to show you, I want to show you a clip from Z32, and that includes both parts of the testimony, me singing, the girl, I mean, I chose this part specifically because this is where, beside him telling some of the horrors, it's where I whine to the camera of how it's hard to be an activist. It's so terrible to be an artist and an activist, which is why I'm here today.
התקדמנו לשם, כאילו הצטמצמנו כזה כל הכוח, והשני נגביסטים שהיו מקדימה אמרו שהם ראו מישהו שנכנס לתוך כאילו שרץ ונכנס, כאילו ברח על הכביש וכנראה נכנס לתוך השטח המגודר. ואז רצנו לשם, אני והמפקד שלי ועוד איזה מישהו. אוקיי. עכשיו כאילו עכשיו יש פה בוסטן מהמם, אבל אז לא היה פה כלום, היה סתם מלא בולדרים כאילו וזה. והגענו לכאן ואני נשענתי על החומה כאילו ופעלה לי על הרגליים וירה, ואז התחלפנו ואז אני זיהיתי כאילו איזה מישהו שוכב שם, למרות שלא באמת זיהיתי וירינו עליו מעבר לחומה, שלא היה לה את כל הקרב הזאתי, ואז זיהינו אותו וחזרנו אחורה לשם, לבחור ההוא ששוכב. ואז באתי, כאילו אמרו לי לעשות על וידוי הריגה, הסתכלתי, הוא היה מחורר מכל כיוון, מין, כאילו איש בן 55 עם שפם לבן, כאילו איש מבוגר, קצת שמנמן, שבאמת מחורר מכל כיוון, ברור שהוא לא חי, ואז רציתי לבדוק עליו אם יש לו נשק ובאתי להרים אותו, והשני נגביסטים שהיו מולי ועשו לי חיפוי, הם התחילו לעשות לי איכס, אתה נוגע בו עם הידיים, אל תיגע בו עם הידיים, איכס, אתה נוגע בו. ואז אמרתי, וואי, באמת זה נכון, אני לא ממש רוצה, איפה שכבר נגעתי בו, אני לא ממש רוצה לגוע בו עם הידיים, ואז עשיתי להרים אותו עם הרגל, להפוך אותו עם הרגל, וזה לא ממש הלך, אז כאילו הפכתי אותו חצי עם הרגל, חצי עם היד, כזה חצי גוף, צד אחד, ואז הצד השני לוודא שאין לו נשק, ולא היה לו נשק. זה ממש הגעיל, כאילו, זה פעם ראשונה שנגעתי פעם ראשונה שראיתי בן אדם מת, ופעם ראשונה שגם נגעתי בגופה, והיה לזה מין מרקם, כאילו, זה משנה, בעיקר אני זוכר זה מין מרקם כמו, לא יודע, משהו כמו ג'לי, משהו כזה, משהו רך כזה שהרגשתי שאם, כאילו, שזה מחליק לי מהיד, או שאם אני אלחץ חזק מדי, אז כמו ג'לי יזרום לי מבין כל האצבעות של הידיים. זה הגעיל אותי באמת, ולא היה לב נשק, ואז התקפלנו בחזרה.
אז איך אפשר לשיר על זה?
בואי תספרי לי את הסיפור שלי, כאילו מה זה?
כאילו זה אתה או כאילו אני עושה עכשיו הצגה של...
כאילו זה אני.
מה זאת אומרת? אני לא יודעת איך עושים את זה.
שמעתי לספר על זה כמה פעמים. אין לי סיגריה.
מה? הלכנו...
כן?
אני לא אספר את זה אחרת נראה לי.
הלכנו.
אבל אני לא זוכרת את הפרטים אחרת.
מה אפשר? דמייני אותם, תמצאי.
טוב.
תמצאי. ספרי לי.
רגע, אני חושבת. המפקד שלנו העיר אותנו בלילה,
זה יופי שהכל גברי.
היינו כזה ממש עייפים מהסיור שעשו לנו יום לפני כן, יש לנו איזה שעתיים. אני לא עושה את זה טוב.
זה מצוין.
באו, העירו אותנו, אמרו לנו 5 דקות להתארגן, לקחו נשק, קחו הכל. לא, פעמים שלא הייתי בסבבה. עלינו על אוטובוסים, בכלל אני ישנתי כל הדרך. טוב, די, בלי הכל הזה, זה מבלבל אותי. ישנתי כל הדרך, התעוררתי, רק שמעתי במיקרופון, יאללה, הנה הרגע שלכם הגיע, חזקו ואימצו, תורכם, אוקיי, בלי תורכם. אני מנסה לחשוב על משפטים כאלה, וזה לא יוצא לי.
משפטים גבריים, צהליים?
כן, כן.
כמו מה?
כמו המשפטים האלה שאני לא יודעת להגיד אותם. נו, כל מה שהרגשת שאמרת שהייתם כזה...
Okay, I plan to show more, but apparently we are running out of time quickly.
Will we just quickly go into questions from the audience? We've got about 9.5 minutes.
But just to make sure that you, with the lights conditions, what you see is not their faces. It's their eyes and mouth, both also the girl. But the boxes belong to other people. We had to cut it out. It would have been cheaper to send them to Argentina to do a first job, do the film, and send them to
I'll open this out. Does anyone have a brief, relatively concise question for Avi?
We can play a little more of this.
Yeah. Yeah? Can I play a little more?
אנחנו הולכים לכבוש את הגבעה.
לחסל את האויב.
בקיצור, הגענו, ראינו איזה חבורה של ערבים. הבנו מה המטרה שלנו, כל מה שרצינו זה רק לתקוע אותה.
להשחיל להם כדור בתחת.
כולם היו מאוד מרוגשים כאלה, ואני, מה זה לא בא לי לעשות את זה.
אתה התחלת... אז זה היה...
לא, אני... הגוף שאני רוצה להיות הוא, אתה מבין? אני נלחם בזה
מחית...
שמוחקים אותי.
באמת?
כן,
לפחות זה מעסיק אותו.
אני פה כלום, כי...
והוא מתחבר
עכשיו, היו מתחילים לראות עליהם, זה היה סמלי. כאילו הייתי, הייתה פה איזו סמליות לכל הדברים. עכשיו היה יוצא הבנג'
אבל בסוף מי נהנה מזה? אני נהנה מזה שעכשיו הוא מתחבט בזה שהוא נהנה מזה. אך האמת שזה אוכל אותי, שזה דוחף אותי לשיר על זה שהוא ירה בו כמו בכתם ושאני יכול למחול על זה.
Thank you very much. The film, you can find the film on YouTube with English subtitles. So if you are interested in watching it, then it's there. And also the different details. Anyway.
Avi's film was on at 4 o'clock in Cinema 1, so hopefully we'll see some of you there. We will be in conversation afterwards again. So big round of applause.